Now, how do I know, for instance, that Dr. Campisi was influential in this matter and that he was the one that was pushing Campbell and Labruto to oppose whatever it was we did? One time, and this was a meeting, a town board meeting sometime during the summer, I think, of '04, we found on the copy machine a resolution written in hand, in Dr. Campisi's hand, where he described exactly what it was that these two other guys, and George Campbell put this resolution in the books later that evening. He told them what to do, what to pass, and how to attack Talmage so that Talmage looks bad and then something else will happen. Now this is the key to the way Dr. Campisi's history is gone. If he doesn't like somebody, he attacks them for the purpose of making them look bad. And it is my contention that this kind of modus operandi is bad for the town of Milan and has wasted a huge amount of time. Well, what happened in my term was we had to spend another whole year sort of in a contested situation when in fact Al Labruto should have stayed part of our team and we should have been able to carry on and present our program. Our program basically was to get the comprehensive plan rewritten, and we fortunately were able to get a chairman for that committee, which was Ross Williams, who did a superb job of working with the public, working with the documents, and producing basically a new comprehensive plan. Well, this became an opposition because, of course, that's what politics is. You pick on your opponents and you try to make their side look bad. You never, and I'll say I've never seen Dr. Campisi work in such a way as to try to work for the good of the town without having some sort of political overtones. Now, some of the things, and let me just tell you, and this is the story here, is that during this time period, both in the end of '04 and all during '05, he continued to do things that made it difficult for us to govern efficiently. And the primary example was the fire contract in 2004. You may or may not have remembered this, but basically what happened was, before I had this rift with Dr. Campisi, Al Labruto had come and said, can Jack and Al and George Campbell be the negotiating team for the new fire contract, which was due to be signed by the end of the 2004. I had said, okay, that seems like a reasonable task. Well, you guys go do it. Well, they took a fair amount of time and a very hard line and really got the fire department angry at them and ended up not being able to come to any kind of negotiating stance. And so by September of that year, both the fire department and the Dr. Campisi came and said, we can't do any more, end of discussion, we're not going to solve this problem. Well, that left it to me to solve the problem, so I went to talk to the fire department with Russ Boletto, as a matter of fact, and we immediately compromised because the difference in this particular dispute was almost negligible. It was a few $1,000s. I think it was $8,000 out of almost a $200,000 contract that they were squabbling over, and the easy thing was simply let's negotiate or let's compromise, which I said we ought to do because it put us on the same page. Now, an aside here. In my time in office, what I decided and learned was that there were two very basic services that were provided to the people, to you all, in the town of Milan. One is highways, and that's a story by itself, and the second is fire protection. My admiration for the fire department just went way up during this period because it's so obvious what a critical function they are. You think about this. No fire department, who are you going to call when you have a problem? Who are you going to call if there's no rescue squad? Who are you going to call if you have a little brush fire that happens to get too close to your buildings? The fire department is a critical part of any community, and we are so very fortunate to have the volunteer fire department that we have here that seems to me we ought to bend over backwards to thank them for the work they're doing. Well, Dr. Campisi didn't think that, and therefore Labruto didn't think that, therefore Campbell didn't think that, and therefore they didn't want to give the fire department anything. They wanted to be tough guys, and show the fire department who was boss. Well, Mr. Boletto and I went and talked to the negotiating team for the fire department. We ended up coming to agreement. I took it back to the board. Campisi and Labruto and Campbell convinced Boletto not to vote for it. And as soon as Boletto backed out, they still had this majority, the three of them, and poor Pauline and I trying to do the town's business. We had no allies, and they were just trying to make us look bad, and they wanted to push it to the limit, and they did. And what happened was we had at least 3 meetings where there were at least 50 to 100 people there, going for 2 or 3 hours trying to hear the public's comments, which was very much in favor of the fire department, and stalling and making it tough. The fire department eventually had to threaten to walk. And finally, they backed down. That is to say, Campbell and Labruto and Boletto backed down, and we were able to pass the contract. Small increase in the taxes, and it was an increase in the taxes, but small and for a very vital service, and we got our contract passed and life went on. Now the reason I point this up is the town wasted so much time and so much effort on what was clearly a political issue where one side was trying to make the other side look bad. That's not the way we should do this, and I'm telling you, that was under direction of Jack Campisi. So you have here a situation where politics and being the boss is more important than doing good, and in politics, and you see this in the national level all the time, pick on everything you can. Never give an inch. Well, I don't like that kind of politics, and I didn't like it then, and I still don't like it, and I think you have to say we're here to solve the problems of the town, not just to win an election, not just to get the upper hand and say, see? Well, if you want to know if that's the only thing that went on with Dr. Campisi in this time period, no, it wasn't. He knew how the town worked. He knew how resolutions worked. He got Labruto to introduce late in the game budget things that would cause trouble that first year. So I ended up not really being a friend of Jack Campisi, even though I had known him for quite a long time. And I'll tell you, he's a bright guy. And I'll tell you, he knows how to do some kinds of things. But this particular kind of political behavior struck me as inappropriate, and basically for the next 3 years of my term, I had to contend with Dr. Campisi regularly getting up in meetings trying to embarrass me, regularly going over the books. He looked at the books in detail every month, going over every invoice, and picked up every little thing he could, including one time he picked up an item for $3.49 where he interpreted it wrong, but $3.49 out of a $2 million budget? He once went through every real receipt and accused me of some kind of weirdness because I forgot to buy a software product without sales tax. All right? We were exempt, and I had paid sales tax and not thinking anything. Sales tax in this case might have been $13, which when he brought it to my attention, I took care of the matter. But the fact is, he spent his whole time doing everything he could to find every little problem that there could be, and he raised his issues. Now, generally, they weren't correct. They weren't anything that was different. There was no significant troubles with any of my financials, even though, remember, the Republican in front of me, Mr. Jeffries, messed up his, and the Republican after me, Mr. Barrett, messed up his. I have 4 years of a good record and good books in order, and even though I didn't always get everything correct right the first time, I knew what I was doing, and we were able to manage the town quite well. So this is not the kind of person that you really want as a leader of your town. And I'm only telling you this because I feel the public ought to know what kinds of things went on with Jack, because now he's running for public office. Okay, I've said my piece. I probably could say some more. but I think I'll let it ride right now. And I'm not telling you how to vote here, but I'm telling you that I am not voting for Jack Campisi for town board. Okay, thank you very much.